Okay, guys, welcome back. This week we're going to be talking about gender and sexual assault and kind of like how those intersect and what differences it would make, or kind of like, yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Faith Namshif. I'm a victim advocate, outreach coordinator, and prevention educator at Rape Counselors of East Alabama. And I'm also a master's in social work student at Jacksonville State University.
I am Amanda Carpenter, and I am a victim advocate / outreach specialist for Rape Counselors of East Alabama. I have a degree in my master's of social work, and I'm going to be getting ready to take my test soon in order to be a licensed social worker.
Perfect. I'm Aileen Nelson. I'm a volunteer with Rape Counselors of East Alabama.
Perfect. All right. So we're really just going to kind of discuss or start this discussion like we have the others with kind of like a framework of question. So the first question I guess I want to pose to you guys is, do you think that gender plays a role in sexual assault? And if so, how do you think it does?
So I think that a lot of time when people think of rape, they think that it happens only to women, but it does not. It happens to all genders. I think that when that males least report it, even though rape is not reported very much as it is, I think men are even less to report it because of the stigma behind it. Just like we had watched a video about how a lot of sitcoms and a lot of movies, they kind of mock and make fun of the whole rape culture with men. And so I think it's a very embarrassing thing because they think, oh, well, men are supposed to be tough. That's not going to happen to men. So I think that it's hard for any gender, but I think especially for the male gender, I think it's a little bit harder because it is stigmatized a little more. That's my opinion. And I think there's research to back that opinion as well.
So I completely agree with Amanda. I definitely think that with men, there's almost an extra layer of stigma based on the expectation or roles we put on them in society. But I also think, just like Alina and I can kind of touched on this before we even started recording, between men and women, there has always been like an unequal dynamic and a history, like an evolutionary history of men being breadwinners, men being more powerful, men being in charge. And I think that that has translated into sexual assault. They've earned that, like, it's kind of like a woman's job to give a man.
It's like an exchange almost for that like allowance from a person in a position of power situation where like there's a power dynamic with a sexual assault. I think like no matter what the gender, the power dynamic plays into it. Mm-hmm. In terms of like being an exchange for something else, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think the power dynamic is a really big part of it, especially like when looking at workplace sexual harassment. I know we tend to think of like females being sexually harassed by bosses, but like I was telling Aileen, I watched that same thing Amanda watched, and there are so many instances of female supervisors sexually harassing like male underlings. And it's used as like a comedic trope because it's like, oh, this is funny. This is supposed to be like a guy in this position, a girl in this position, but we switched it. So it's hilarious now.
Yeah. And that plays into like expecting men to be emotionally hard or tougher to be able to like withstand that and have it be no big deal. That's the same like toughness or whatever that drives someone to rape someone, thinking that like you're tough or you can just kind of take whatever you want.
Well, and I also think too that I'm even ashamed to say that I'm guilty of it. Before I started working with Rape Counselors of East Alabama, or even before pursuing my master's in social work, you know, I always grew up around people having funny, you know, oh, when you go to prison, make sure you don't pick up the soap kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I was guilty of laughing at that. And, you know, now as I have grown and matured, I realize that that is not funny, and that seriously does happen in our prison systems. And that really, rape with a man is a very serious matter, and it does happen. And, I feel like a lot of men, they're ashamed because they're like, well, I should have been strong enough to fight off that perpetrator. Or it just makes them, I think the emotional toll is just really, really hard for them, just like it is for a woman. And a lot of women, men, or people in our society probably, just like a woman, don't believe them as they would a woman, because it's like, well, how did you get raped? You're a man. You're like this. You're a big, strong man, and you got tattoos all over you. How did you get raped? Like, they just don't see the seriousness behind it. And I think a lot of people make funny jokes, and we see it on our social media. And unless you are passionate about something, or you realize the seriousness of it, or you're around people that have had those things happen to them, I think that you don't take it serious. And you get into that flow of laughing with people about it and not recognizing the seriousness behind it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Definitely. I know we talked about, like, I believe in someone who talked about how you grow up and you always see these rape jokes, these jokes about sexual harassment, and you're kind of just teaching people that it's a joke. Like, if you see that over and over again as a joke, it's just going to be a joke. And when you get to college, it's like, this isn't a joke. If that makes sense. But yeah, that actually brings me to the next question. What is toxic masculinity? Amanda kind of touched on it a little bit. Do you guys have any thoughts on toxic masculinity and how it might impact?
I think toxic masculinity kind of imposes emotional expectations on men that are super unrealistic. Like, you can't expect somebody not to be vulnerable and not to cry and have deep emotions and be hurt, and just to be able to kind of stand and take everything and be like the tough guy or whatever. That toxic masculinity kind of expects people to be. Repressing that kind of thing always kind of results in anger coming out, I think, because it's like kind of self-directed anger that's then being misdirected out, because when you're told that you can't accept a part of yourself, like having those deeper, like more vulnerable emotions, it's rejecting like a huge thing, and then that rejection expands.
Yeah, no, I think that's a huge part of it. Just being told, like, there are some emotions you can show. They're like manly emotions. They're like anger and acting out, like you said. But the other ones, the ones that are kind of more serious and needed for emotional relationships and help them, when men and women kind of relate to each other, they're not kind of taught this is men. It's a woman emotion. It's not a man emotion. And I think looking at toxic masculinity too, I think it's important to look at just all the examples that we've seen over the years about, you see a female teacher engaging in any sort of sexual activity with a student, it's disgusting. Or, sorry, female with a male student, it's like praised, but then a male with a female student, it's like disgusting. I said that wrong, but you know what I'm saying. Like,
yeah, but it's a little more normalized to have like the male teacher and the female student.
Yeah, because it's like, well, like people like pat the guy on the back and they're like, oh yeah, man, you had so-and-so, like 13, 14-year-old boys and like their teachers. And it's like, that's good for you, man. Like, that's great. Why would you not want that? But it's sexual harassment. But then you look at it and it's like, well, if it's like a 13-year-old girl and a man, that's incredibly crazy.
Yeah.
There's like that double, because it's saying basically, well, you're a guy, you should always want it. You're a guy, you should always be down for sex, even if it's not like, you know, something you.
And I think too that even, boys, even at a young age, they're brought up by, dry them tears up, suck it up, be a man, quit crying, you just go with it. So, it starts at a very young age of, it's just like, it kind of makes me think of boys and men that play sports. You don't cry, you get up and you keep going. And so I feel like if something was like that to happen to them, or they were like, well, I was sexually assaulted by this person, they're more likely to say, well, it sucks that happened, suck it up, move on, kind of thing. And
or did you want that? Don't guys always want sex?
Right.
If they're just giving it, why would you not just, Yeah, I agree. So I actually found this quote that I thought was kind of like pretty relevant to this topic. It was, you're born with a sex, then you learn how to degender. And I think that's really just kind of like what we're talking about. Like, they grow up, boys and girls grow up, and they are supposed to fill these certain roles. They're supposed to do these certain things based on what they're taught in media, what they're taught by their parents, what they're taught by their schools. And that's why you see people in really like country towns and stuff, like they have these very rigid gender roles. But then maybe you go to California or New York and they're kind of more androgynous and like kind of more egalitarian, which of course this is like not just like stereotype, but like just kind of like based on like their areas and what their beliefs and stuff are.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, and I've heard, on things too before, talking about the transgender culture, well, he's a sissified boy. He deserved that. Or, that's why he got, sexually assaulted, because he was walking around acting like a girl or acting like a female. So, he deserved that because that's what he wanted, because of the way he wore his pants too tight. Yeah. So it happens to that culture as well, because even females, it's the whole dress stigma. Well, how short was her skirt, or how tight was her jeans, or how low was her top? And so I feel like the transgender culture get that as well, which is hard.
Which like at a even higher amount, because I think when people see individuals who don't conform to their rigid gender roles, it confuses them and they don't know what to do, and they just kind of act out in fear, but it comes out in anger and hate.
Yeah.
I definitely agree that LGBTQIA plus community, they experience so much higher levels because people just, they can't stand that they're not conforming to those gender roles. Like, this is what a woman is.
That it's been enforced that you have to be one of two things.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good point. So I feel like we've covered like a few of the ones, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, but why do you think it's harmful to hold these rigid gender expectations?
Because we should take care of everyone in our society, no matter male, female, transgender, whoever. We should give everyone the same respect and realize that everyone has feelings, everyone has things that they're going through, and we should respect that, regardless if we feel different about how they live or how they dress. Our job is not to judge. Our job is to support everyone. That's kind of what I think. Does that answer your question, Faith?
Yeah, no, I think those are all really good points.
Gender is so complex, right? There's so many different psychological and physiological factors and so many things that we don't understand because there hasn't been research. But I think that part of the reason why there hasn't been research is because inherently in our culture we said there are two genders and we have to conform to those, and it's such a new age thing to break out even of that idea that's why there's like not a large knowledge base out there that just most of the population knows. Like, that's why I'm so uneducated on it too. It's just because.
Well, I think that, it is due to the fact that a lot of people are uneducated, but I also want to bring up the point that a lot of people are scared to have the discussion because of the fear of saying the wrong thing.
Yeah.
That is why a lot of things are not talked about. That's why there is so many people that are uneducated about so many things, is because it's like the white elephant or whatever in the room. People don't want to talk about it because they're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. Even though they mean it one way, it comes out another way. And so I think the fear of people talking about it and having the discussion is also a huge impact of why people don't talk about it. They don't want to be a part of it. Like, I don't want to talk about that, and they move on.
Yeah.
It's like, that's why the rape culture, it is hard to talk about, because even working at Rape Counselors of East Alabama, I did my internship at East Alabama Mental Health. I would go out there, talk about drugs, alcohol. People were all about it. People wanted to listen. People would listen. There was no shame. There was no wanting to avoid the conversation. People were okay to engage in those conversations. But when you start saying the word rape, a lot of people shut down from that word, just calling around and saying, hey, do you guys mind us putting some cards out saying who we are with a phone number and a little bit about what we do, that we support survivors that have been sexually assaulted? And before you can even get that out, it's like, oh, I don't think they would allow that. Thanks for your day. So I think until people are really willing to talk about rape and sexual assault and gender roles, I think we're always going to kind of be stuck until we just keep advocating and showing awareness about these topics, because it's such a white elephant in the room.
Yeah. I mean, that's nail on the head, Amanda, really. Like, I think, which is so good. And I think it's so important that we're having these discussions and that we're showing, like, I don't know everything, obviously. Amanda doesn't, Aline doesn't. Vicky's been here for 24 years and doesn't know everything. Like, you're never going to know, and things are always going to change. I was doing like a self-care module yesterday, and it was talking about truth, and it basically said truth is constantly challenging your own ideas of truth. I mean, if you think back on it, I was telling Aline, I used to watch a show called New Girl. I'm sure so many people have seen it. And there's a scene where a male works in an entirely female office except for him. And they make him dress up as sexy Santa every year. And when I was in 6th, 7th grade, when I first watched that episode, I thought it was funny. And then I watched it back going on a rerun like a week ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is sexual harassment. Can you imagine what it would look like if we had put a woman in that position in a completely male office? Like, that would be exposed so differently. And I think that just kind of like shows we as a community, a nation, we as a society are evolving, and we're trying to keep up and do, I think we are trying to positively go in the right direction. I do, because I know this now. I'm 22 years old now. I know this. Now I know that was a scene of sexual harassment. And I think we kind of like just look back, and it shows through media, it shows how far we've come. But then you look and it's like, oh my gosh, that was only that years ago. Like, how much further we have. So,
and think about people who watched that growing up too, and just thought like, oh, if this happened to me and like I didn't feel okay with it, it's funny.
Yeah. How's gender portrayed in the media? How do they do it? How has it evolved? What does it look like now? What it used to look like? Is it good, bad?
So I was kind of thinking about this in terms of like, if you think about Disney princesses from the beginning of Disney, from like Snow White, when she eats an apple and she's poisoned and she's unconscious, and her knight in shining armor comes in and kisses her, brings her back to life. Sleeping Beauty, same thing. Pricks her finger, unconscious, knight in shining armor, kiss, wasn't asked for, she's alive, she's perfect. You take it to like Frozen, where then there's not really a knight in shining armor who's coming in to save someone, but then there's still people who are getting angry because Disney didn't go in and fully develop the faces of the characters to be like not super identical. And that's still just like a disparity of gender equality that's in a lot of animation, that the female characters look really similar, but still at least one female character that didn't like get married at the end of the movie. Then you look and they've got to Moana, who like does her own thing. She doesn't end up with a guy at the end. She's just trying to take care of her family, and like, I don't know. I think if you look at the evolution of that, you can kind of see how it's been a little more normalized to take the female archetype out of like the needing to be saved, needing to be taken care of thing, to a more normal thing of like taking care of your own business. And, you know, Moana saves the world by herself or with help, but she's the main character. Mm-hmm. I think that kind of portrayal really helps. kind of normalize a gender equality, I think.
Yeah, no, I like that because I mean, I think back, I watched Disney princesses as a child, and my takeaway from that was, oh man, one day I want to marry a prince. But now, like, okay, I'm embarrassed. I haven't seen Moana, but from based on what you said, it's kind of take away like, wow, I want to take care of my family. I want to change the world. I want to do something great. Like, does that make sense? And that's what we're showing, like, young girls, young men.
Exactly. Because to have a role model to, like, look up to, even in something like a Disney movie where it's obviously fake, it's important for, like, especially when you're little, to see, like, oh, I don't have to just grow up to be this one way.
Yeah, no, that's a
right. Well, and I think, I agree. I mean, well, you know, so me and my son like to watch Young Sheldon together. And I really like, there's a part where the girl, I want to say she's 10 years old, I think, maybe 10 or 11, and she wants to play baseball. She doesn't want to play softball. She wants to play baseball. And, of course, you know, as soon as she tries to go and try out for the team, it's automatic, you know, well, you're a girl. This is not fit the, you know, the normal that boys play baseball and girls play, you know, they dance or they do other things. They don't play baseball. They don't get dirty. And so she ends up going back, and then her dad ends up going back and talking to him, and then she ends up going back and giving her a try, and she ends up being really good at it, and then they all accept her throughout it. But it was that initiative that she had to take in order to show that she deserved to be there just like anybody. And just because she was a girl doesn't mean girls can't play ball. And I really like that, because I think the more that movies and sitcoms show those things, it will encourage people to go outside of the normal gender role that they normally would stay in, because it's like, well, just girls dance or just girls are cheerleaders. I mean, look at the colleges. I mean, you see men that are cheerleaders, right? They have male cheerleaders, and
they're some of the best cheerleaders because they can do the pole thingy. We're Auburn people, so if no one knows what I'm talking about, but
and the bottom line is we need men to be in those positions because they are stronger, and they need to be a part of that. And so I think people are starting to understand that they need different gender roles in different things, because everybody can bring something to the table. Just because you're a girl or a boy doesn't mean that you're not necessarily able to do or perform that job.
Yeah. No.
Did I go? Am I staying on topic a little bit of what you're asking?
I think that's completely.
Okay, good.
The male cheerleader is a good example. I think forget about. Because, and then it's also funny because I always, like, you know, when you find males in like traditionally female roles, like nurses or like stuff like that, I feel like we always almost glorify them too, because it's like, yes, you've come down to our level. But then it's like, well, what? Why are we making it like that? It's just we're equal people. We're doing our jobs. Who cares? But yeah. Okay, so going through that, what can we do? What are individual actions we can take to break down these expectations and roles?
Well, the first step is we have to be non-judgmental ourselves.
Yeah.
We have to, I guess, basically, we have to believe what we preach and what we show awareness about. And I think there is a lot of times when people don't truly 100% believe what they're preaching about or what they're showing awareness to. So I think once a person recognizes the stigma behind things and the importance of things, then I think you can take it a step further, because when you start showing that awareness, you're passionate about it, and it shows that you're passionate about it. And people are more willing to listen to people that when they talk about things, they know that they're talking about it from the bottom of their heart. They're not just saying it because that's what they're supposed to say.
Right. Or if you're in a position where you're like preaching all about how men and women should be equal and blah, 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 and then people are like, but didn't she just do this? Or didn't she just say that? Like, seriously, is that really what that looks like? So yeah, I think that's a really good chance. And Amanda, I'm going to ask you this. I hope I don't put you on the spot. Just raising children. Is there like any specific thing you teach them or tell them, or like things you try to implement? About just like, I guess, gender roles and like relationships with men and women and how to treat women. I guess because you have sons.
Yeah, well, I mean, I tell my children all the time, you know, I know I am guilty, I guess, of always saying, you know, you should respect women. I do say that. I don't necessarily mean don't respect men. I tell them to respect everybody. I definitely tell them that, you know, girls can do things just like a male can, because I know there's a lot of time I have teenage boys and they're like, oh, girls can't do that, or girls are supposed to be the ones in there, you know, washing dishes and doing the clothes. I'm a boy. I'm not supposed to do that, Mama. That's what the mamas are supposed to do. And I have to continuously tell them, no, that it is in any kind of relationship, whether it's your relationship with your spouse or a relationship at your job, it's equal. It's a partnership. It's teamwork. And so those roles are, no, there's no roles like that. It's just like my mother and my stepfather. I mean, when they get done eating, my stepfather will take his plate and he'll wash his own plate. He doesn't expect my mother to do it because she's a female. We have conversations about those things. So I'm trying to break the cycle with my own children of the whole gender roles and what women are supposed to do this and women are supposed to stay home while the man does this. It is a continuous conversation. However, there are a lot of social media. There is a lot of TikToks. There is a lot of things out there that my children think are hilarious. And I'm like, you know, that's really not funny because they're really degrading the female culture, or they're degrading the male culture, or they're degrading different cultures and different people. So I just have to have that conversation with them all the time. And I do it because I mean, that's what I am, an advocate. However, I know there's a lot of people that don't do that. Did that answer your question, Ms. Bates?
Yeah. That's the most important thing, Amanda, is that you're like role modeling it. Like you're not only telling them that, but then you're showing it with your actions. And then when they say something, you're not just letting it slide. Like the biggest thing that I think happens to a lot of us is we hear somebody say something inappropriate or call something or somebody gay or like say something derogatory about women. And it's easy to just kind of laugh and not make a big deal out of it or whatever. But I think that that's the most important thing, is that those of us who feel strongly about this and are educated, it's important to speak up, to kind of normalize conversation about it so that we can kind of disparage a lot of the expectations and a lot of the underlying beliefs that aren't true that go behind the prejudice.
Yeah, literally 100% agree. I think, like you said, it can be awkward and it can be hard. I agree. I think it's on us to make those decisions to say, hey, what you said wasn't cool. What you said was racist, homophobic, blah, 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 name it off. Like, I really don't feel comfortable you talking like that around me. And you know what? Next time they're going to think about it before they say it again. Because they're going to be like, oh, that was kind of embarrassing when she called me out on that. Like, I used to be so scared to do stuff like that. Like, I could name so many instances in high school where I would just let guys talk to me in ways they never should have talked to me because I was afraid that they were going to not want to be my friend, or they were going to make fun of me or call me innocent or anything. But I literally, like 2 months ago, had a guy who I was chatting with, never met in my entire life, call me fat on an internet app. And I called him out and I said, you know what? I'm not. Thank you for your input. And you're very lucky that I am who I am. But if I was someone who was struggling with an eating disorder, struggling mental health-wise, that could really set me off. And I hope that next time you're going to do better. And at this point in my life, I just don't care. I'm going to call you out because I don't have time to deal with people. And people who take super offense to that and don't look inward and take in reflection based on things like that, I don't want in my life. And that's okay. Like, I'm not really scared of losing people anymore because I know that if they're not willing to look at themselves, then I probably don't want them in my life. So, yeah.
Well, and I think too, I think that when people do start advocating for themselves and sticking up for themselves, they are called difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's women.
Yes.
Like yes, when a woman acts bossy, she's considered a B word, but when a guy acts bossy, he's just the boss. Taylor Swift.
Right. It's just like when you start talking about if a man has sex with 25 women, hey, he's the man. But when you have a girl that has slept with 25 people, she's a hoe. She's a slut. So it's just those different, but that goes back to the gender roles and how people, and that's why it's important for us to advocate and to show the importance of that.
Yeah, 100%. That's why I'm glad to do what we do and to be able to have discussions like this. I think it's so important. All right, guys, this is my last question, and this is not like right or wrong answer. I just genuinely want your opinions. Do you think that if we change our gender expectations and our gender roles and how women should act and how men should act and how so-and-so should act, do you think this would help change the rates of sexual assault?
Absolutely.
Amanda?
I think the way I'm going to answer that is I think showing people awareness of what consent is, I think will definitely help with the rape culture. However, I do also know that there's a lot of people out there that have a need for control, and there's some things you can't control and people you can't control because of multiple things.
Oh, yeah.
So I think showing awareness, especially, I think it will improve and help if you start with starting with 4th, 5th grade, talking about consent, talking about what consent is. You know, like I've had to have conversations with my 15-year-old, he likes this little girl that's, 13. And I'm like, nope, that's not good, because you need to stay someone that's your same age. And you need to ask a girl, is it okay if I hug you? Is it okay if I kiss you? Those things are important, and if you're not taught that, then you don't know. And so I do think that needs to be taught, and I think as long as people and college guys are educated on what consent is and that a girl can change her mind and she's not just playing and teasing when she says, stop that. Yeah. I think that will definitely help. Do I think it will just minimize the rape culture altogether? No, because there is a lot of people out there that have a need for control and what they have seen in their past. But I do think showing awareness will definitely, I guess the word we're using these days is flatlining it a little bit with I guess that's what they use with COVID-19, flatten the curve.
Yep.
So I guess it will flatten the curve of it happen as much and people being more aware of what consent and what is considered rape. Do I think it will just completely get rid of it? No. Did I answer that the way?
No. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, I definitely agree with what both of you are saying. I sadly don't think that there will ever be a point in society where there won't be sexual assault, sadly, because there's never going to be a point where there's no murder or crime or anything like that, just because people are imperfect. Like, there's just naturally people out there who don't want to do the right thing, like Amanda said, but I definitely think changing gender expectations, like, I know it's always a common thing in rape culture, it's teaching girls not to be raped instead of teaching men how not to rape. But like, we could change that to anything, like just teaching kids at a young age what consent is, like Amanda said, teaching them how not to rape instead of expecting it to be put on a certain gender who is disproportionately affected to do these steps, dress a certain way, not get drunk, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, I think if we change those gender roles and what's expected of people, it will.
Yeah, I just think that educating people more on women and on more on the LGBTQIA community, and like educating on groups that are different and normally kind of looked down upon in positions of power.
Mm-hmm.
I think that educating people more on that is going to go with kind of destroying the norm. And with that education can come education on consent and everything. And that's why it'll go hand in hand.
Yeah, no, I like that.
But obviously, you're never going to be able to like 100%. But I don't want to say you'll never be able to 100% eliminate rape. That's just a depressing thought. But obviously, like, this is something that's so ingrained into our culture that isn't going to go anywhere without like a major overhaul of how our society views these groups as a whole.
Yeah, 100% agree. I'm glad you brought the LGBTQI plus into it, because like we talked about earlier, like that's such a huge group that doesn't conform to the gender role that we're put in, so then it happens. But yeah, I like that. Do you guys have any final comments, questions, thoughts on the issue before we sign off?
No.
No. All right.
I appreciate you doing this. And
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I've actually really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope we can continue it. And if you guys, anyone watching, wants to comment below and continue the conversation, ask questions, please feel free to do so. But thank you for tuning in today, and I will see you guys next week.